Today we're going to be talking about the presidential candidates for the office of President of the United States. Today's podcast is called Three Candidates for Office: Clinton, Trump, and Johnson. This is podcast number 19, Wednesday, September 14th, 2016.
Educational, informative, controversial content to keep you free. This is the Radio for Freedom Network, featuring The Phil Garris Show, broadcasting from the city beautiful Orlando, Florida.
All right, welcome back to the Phil Garris Show, brought to you by Radio for Freedom. You can catch the Phil Garris Show anytime on Radio for Freedom, and we're also syndicated throughout the web. On today's show, we're going to talk about the three candidates for office. Our first candidate we're going to talk about is Hillary Clinton. We all know that she's been ill with pneumonia, and that is something that should have been disclosed to the American people. However, it wasn't. I feel that's a red flag with Hillary Clinton because she wasn't honest and forthright with the American people. But Hillary is going to return tomorrow back on the campaign trail. Radio for Freedom, we've eliminated Hillary Clinton as choosing her for a candidate for President of the United States. This is based on the amount of money that she has accepted from the fossil fuel industry and big oil. According to Bernie Sanders on Good Morning America, quote, "The fossil fuel industry has given more than $4.5 million in support of Clinton's bid," unquote. That's a lot of money. And she evidently has accepted this money from the fossil fuel industry. And I feel like she's going to owe these people a lot of favors. I mean, who gives you $4.5 million and doesn't expect anything in return? People running these oil companies are very business savvy. They got to where they're at by being savvy. They're not going to give away $4.5 million and not expect something. Also, Bernie Sanders has indicated that Hillary has helped the oil industry build a pipeline. According to Bernie Sanders, when Hillary Clinton was secretary, she helped approve a tar sands pipeline and helped approve drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. While she was accepting money with one hand, she was also giving speeches on how oil companies damage the environment. The reason why she's a master cover-up. While she was accepting this money, she was calling climate change, quote, "the most consequential, urgent, sweeping collection of challenges we face as a nation," quote unquote. That was from the Huffington Post. And she hasn't really been forthright and honest with the American people. While taking money in one hand and talking out of the side of her mouth, she's indicated she is not very honest. Our second candidate that we're going to look at is Donald Trump. Man, we got a boatload on this dude. We all know that Donald Trump wants to build a wall. He's called Mexicans rapists and yada yada yada. It goes on and on. But what really upsets me about Donald Trump, he has called two groups of people that I admire most. One is our veterans, and second is our farmers. When Donald Trump was in college, avoiding the draft by hiding underneath his desk, John McCain was shot down over North Vietnam and spent many years in the Hanoi Hilton. Donald Trump called John McCain a loser. He said he is not a war hero and said he was a loser. Well, I got news for you, Mr. Trump. John McCain is a war hero, and he wasn't hiding under his desk in college. He was an officer in the United States Navy, doing his duty and doing what his country asked of him. The second group of people that I admire most are farmers. Donald Trump tried to steal the land out from a man named Michael Forbes in Scotland. Michael Forbes was a farmer, but he was a tough farmer, and he refused to give up to Donald Trump. Donald Trump tried every dirty trick in the book to take the land away from Michael Forbes. Donald Trump called farmers, well, I should say Donald Trump said that farmers live like pigs, and he was referring to Michael Forbes because Michael Forbes would not sell his land for a golf course. Another person I admire are senior citizens. Vera Koking was a senior citizen in Atlantic City that had a house right next to the boardwalk. Donald Trump wanted her house. Vera refused to sell her home to Donald Trump so he could build a parking garage for his limousine so he could make more money. Donald Trump teamed up with overzealous politicians who were tax hungry and that wanted a larger tax base for Atlantic City. And they tried to use trumped up building codes and zoning laws to take Vera's home away from her. It went to court, and thank God Vera won. So Donald Trump has run up against a few tough cookies, a tough farmer and a tough widow. Way to go, Michael and Vera. Stand up to tyranny. The third person that we're going to talk about running for office is Gary Johnson. I guess you could say he's the underdog in the campaign. Right now he's pulling anywhere between 10 and 15%. He needs 15% in 5 national recognized polls to be included in the presidential debate. We don't know if he's going to make it, but we all know the system is rigged. And we all know that the presidential debates want to keep out third-party candidates. It makes you wonder what they're afraid of. Are they afraid of what Gary Johnson has to say? Or they just want to talk about how Gary Johnson did not know what Aleppo was? Gary Johnson did make a mistake, and he did not know what Aleppo was. And we all know that went a little viral, but that was overshadowed by Hillary's illness. It seems like Gary Johnson has bounced back. But could you imagine if Mike Barnacle had asked Donald Trump what is Aleppo? At least Gary Johnson tried to answer the question. Donald Trump probably would have said, "What's Aleppo? I'll tell you what Aleppo is. I know more about Aleppo than the generals do. Ha! I'm Donald Trump." See, have you noticed Donald Trump never ever addresses the question? He always spins it and makes himself look good. Or he tries to make himself look good. But actually what I think is he makes himself look like an idiot. For anyone to say, "I know more about ISIS than the generals do," I mean, that is just asinine. And if he was asked about Aleppo, he probably would not know where Aleppo is and would be forced to say, "I know more about Aleppo than you do, Mike Barnacle." This is a person we have running for president. But anyway, I want to get back talking about Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson, when he first started out, his poll numbers were abysmal. I mean, hardly anybody knew what he was, or who he was, or what he stood for. Or for that fact, most people didn't know what libertarians were. But thanks to Gary Johnson, America is discovering libertarians. And Gary Johnson poll numbers have been rising. And if Gary Johnson is included in the debates, the libertarians have a good shot at the presidency of the United States. Even if libertarians do not win this election, it sets the stage for libertarianism in America. My fellow Americans, in a few short weeks, we will be asked to vote for the President of the United States. We have 3 basic choices. Those choices are Clinton, Trump, and Johnson. First, we'll talk about Clinton. Clinton is an elitist who has ignored young Americans and people in rural areas. As we've seen from the Bernie Sanders campaign, young people flock to Bernie Sanders. And the reason why they flock to Bernie Sanders is because Clinton has ignored young people. Bernie Sanders did not ignore young people, and Bernie Sanders respected young people and offered hope for the future in America for young people. This has been ignored by Clinton and this administration. Also, with this administration and Clinton, they've ignored people in rural areas. Clinton's boss, and I would say her friend and mentor, made a comment about people in rural areas, how they cling to their guns and religion. I'll read the quote. I'll paraphrase the quote the best I can. Here's the quote from Barack Obama, President of the United States. Quote, "People have been beaten down so long, they feel betrayed by the government. They get bitter and cling to their guns." Unquote. Well, you're right. People do feel beaten down. They feel beaten down by your administration and by the policies of your administration. But we're talking about Clinton. And Clinton is going to continue these policies that this administration has set forth that has not benefited people of color, young people, and people in rural areas. Our second choice is Trump. This man is scary. Can you imagine this man traveling around the world with the nuclear football, with his finger on the nuclear button, a man that Senator Lindsey Graham called a race-baiting, xenophobic bigot. This man is not fit to even run as President of the United States. The last candidate for President of the United States we're going to talk about is Governor Gary Johnson. As we know, the other week Gary made a mistake by not knowing what Aleppo was. But compared to the other two candidates and their mistakes, it pales in comparison. There's some very good things about Gary Johnson. The things I like about Gary Johnson is his platform and his political beliefs are in line with what most Americans think. That our government should be financially conservative and financially responsible. And our government should stay out of people's lives and especially stay out of their bedroom and their choices in life. Americans should enjoy the right to freely choose how they want to live their life. In the last few days, Gary Johnson has had remarkable success. The first one being the Union Leader, a New Hampshire conservative daily paper, has broke a 100-year tradition and is endorsing Gary Johnson. Another big success has been reported by the Washington Post that Hillary Clinton is only up by 2 points on Gary Johnson with young voters. It seems like Gary Johnson has been pulling young voters from the Bernie Sanders camp over to the Libertarian camp. And now the time has come for the Phil Garris Show and RadioForFreedom.com to endorse their candidate for President of the United States. We have reviewed the 3 candidates running for office: Clinton, Trump, and Johnson. Our endorsement is Gary Johnson. We feel he is the best man to be President of the United States because of his stance on personal liberties for Americans and to restore the liberties that we have lost. Thank you for listening to the Phil Garris Show. You can catch us on RadioForFreedom.com. It would be very much appreciated if you could donate a small amount of money to our show to help us stay in business and bring you these broadcasts about liberty and freedom. Thank you for listening and have a good day.